Okay, guys, Penn State fans, I'm Bob Flounders, joined by Daniel Gallen. It's the Blue White Breakdown podcast. We are taping this Wednesday afternoon. It's a gorgeous Wednesday afternoon, Daniel, in Harrisburg, where I am, and I'm sure it's just as nice in State College. We're going to talk Penn State football. Daniel's going to be with us. He already does one with Dustin Hockensmith. Out of season, he's going to be with me. We're going to tape it on Wednesdays. It'll either come out Wednesday night or Thursday, hopefully, unless one of us is on vacation. Dave Jones is still going to do one with me. Dustin Hockensmith is going to be involved, but we're going to have plenty of Penn State content. We're not going to forget about the Penn State fans. Daniel, I still see the guitar. I'm glad you didn't move anything around. Even though Dave and I did one yesterday, I still feel like we didn't get to about 80% of the stuff we could have talked about. I know there was some transfer portal news today, but before I get to that, is there anything at the top of your checklist you want to tell the Penn State fans about? What do they need to know?
Oh man, I mean, we're less than a week away from National Signing Day. By the time you hear this, that highly regarded class of 2022 should be signed, sealed, and delivered in about a week, depending on when you listen to this. So that's something to listen to or to watch out for. And obviously, when it comes to recruiting, a lot can change. Penn State has had this class pretty much sewn up since July. There's been a couple changes here and there, but I think they're expected to get to the finish line with this group. But obviously, things can change. There could be a couple new additions, maybe a surprise subtraction. But I think that's the main thing to keep an eye on right now. And then we've got some coaching changes, the coaching carousel spinning, and then obviously I think we'll see more and more guys go into the transfer portal if that is going to happen in the next couple days and weeks.
Okay, Daniel. Well, let's start with recruiting. And one thing I think we could get to, and you can maybe expound upon, is there's a certain running back from Pennsylvania that just received a very prestigious honor. And I was thinking, if you're a Penn State fan, and Daniel, I know you're obviously very objective, but if you were a Penn State fan, given what you saw play out this year on the field, would you be more excited about the governor? It's Nick Singleton. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Nick Singleton. Sorry, Penn State fans. He's the guy. He's the guy to talk to about recruiting. Would you be more excited about him coming on board, given what happened with the running game? Or are you just more excited because it's a quarterback, it's a five-star quarterback, Drew Allar from Ohio, also Bo Prabula, let's not forget about him. I do not want to have egg on my face if he beats out Drew Allar down the road. Do you think the fans are more excited about one addition over the other?
I mean, I think that the quarterback is always where it starts. Drew Allar in the 24/7 Sports House rankings, he's the number 3 player in the nation. He's the top ranked offensive player. It's really hard to overlook those 5 stars. Obviously, Nick Singleton is rated as a 5-star by a couple different outlets. But the idea of a 5-star quarterback for a program that obviously Trace McSorley is an all-time great, but coming in, he wasn't necessarily that transformative talent. He was kind of he was kind of your scrappy upstart story. Whereas Drew Allar is going to come in as the 5-star, 6'5", 230 pounds, can make all the throws.
Penn State fans have heard about 5 stars that are 6'5", 230 pounds that are supposed to be difference makers. Just so you know, that's why I'm just wondering if they're a little bit nervous because of the Hackenberg thing that went down in State College.
Yeah, and I think overall, though, just kind of in some of the interactions that I've had with our subscribers in terms of the recruiting things, I think that everyone makes a pretty astute point when it comes to both Allar and Singleton and kind of the rest of the class, that a lot of this doesn't matter if the offensive line isn't where it needs to be. They have 4 offensive line or offensive tackle prospects committed. Obviously, that there's some guys that are going to need to develop who are already on the roster. But there is an element where obviously none of this matters if the offensive line isn't good. But going back to just, I think, general excitement, I mean, obviously Nick Singleton is the in-state kid. When you watch his film, he makes a lot of things happen. Maybe he could be that type of running back who can make up for some offensive line deficiencies by making guys miss in the hole, get into the second level and making things happen. But I think just in terms of what this program has kind of had, what people have wanted, I think it's really, really hard to overlook excitement for the quarterback.
Now, what was the award? It was Singleton, the Gatorade National Player of the Year, or the Gatorade Player of the Year in Pennsylvania?
So he's the Gatorade Pennsylvania Player of the Year, but he's one of 3 finalists for the National Player of the Year, along with Cade Klubnik, who's a quarterback from Texas who's gone to Clemson, and then a wide receiver from California who's committed to Oregon. So, and those guys are also 5-star recruits. So he's in good company. Obviously there's a lot that goes into these awards. Like Drew Allar wasn't the Ohio State Player of the Year, which I saw some people raising their eyebrows about that, but I think it's a really cool honor for Nick Singleton, and a guy who's really raised his stock a ton this year and been a lot of fun to follow and a lot of fun to watch.
Yep. Daniel, speaking of Penn State quarterbacks, let's talk a little bit about the one that is still here, the veteran starter. I believe he was in Las Vegas on Tuesday. I believe Tuesday, it might have been Monday, to accept a scholar, an academic award. He's a very good student, Sean Clifford. And I kind of saw, this did not surprise me. I don't think it surprised you. They had I think an interview session with him. He wasn't really ready to say anything about his plans for next year. Now, that didn't surprise me at all. I don't read too much into that. I just wonder, to me, I still think he's probably not coming back, but I still think he wants. I think he really wants to play well in the bowl game against a good Arkansas team, and maybe go out on a better note than they lost in the snow to Michigan State. They couldn't beat Michigan at home. He was doing well at Iowa, suffered the injury, came back, couldn't beat Illinois even though he wasn't healthy. I still think in the back of Sean's mind, he'd really like to finish on the strongest note possible at Penn State. And whatever he's going to decide, I think he's probably has his mind made up. Whatever he's going to decide, I think is coming after the bowl game.
Yeah, and on top of that too, with kind of how the season ended, he couldn't even finish his senior day game against Rutgers, which they won. But he didn't even make it through that game because of the flu or maybe something else. He took some hard hits in that game early. So yeah, I mean, I think that he's someone where I think that all the things I'd heard about him in terms of his personality, kind of how, the fiery, the kind of hard-nosed thing. I mean, I think all that's pretty much held true. And I think that it is something that I mean, he's a quarterback. These guys are very aware of what that means, especially in a program like this, where I think that he wants to go out on a strong note. He wants if this is the last time, to be remembered for going down to Tampa, having this great performance in the bowl game instead of the snow, getting sick, these losses, the Iowa game. But yeah, I mean, I think the timeline for all this stuff is really interesting. James Franklin is he keeps pushing it off. He says it's going to be the kids' decisions. The announcements are going to come. And it does kind of feel like it's setting up for there's going to be a whole bunch at once, maybe, of who's playing in the bowl game, who isn't, who's leaving, who isn't, who's taking advantage of extra eligibility, who isn't. There's just a lot of questions that are kind of hanging over this. But I think Clifford's decision is interesting. And I think that what he decides to do kind of sets in motion what Penn State has to do at quarterback this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, Daniel, I think it's if there's some kids, and I'm talking about Jahan Dotson at the top of the list. If there's some kids that want to just get ready for the NFL draft for whatever reason, whether it's Rasheed Walker, who could still, I think, easily leave, even Brandon Smith, some other players like that. Jair Brown has kind of been wavering a little bit. If they want to get on to the next phase of their life and maybe not play in the bowl game, I think the announcement comes, before the bowl game. But if they're going to make, there's been a history there where Penn State has kind of played some of their better players in the bowl game, not necessarily play them the whole game, rotated them in with somebody else. I think they did it with Miles Sanders. They did it with some offensive linemen, some defensive linemen. And then they have the written statement, on Twitter shortly after saying, thank you, Penn State, Coach Franklin, my teammates. So I think they're definitely not playing in the bowl game. I think it's going to be before Christmas. And if they're gonna make a cameo then they're going to wait and to deliver the news right after the bowl game. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a good point on guys making cameos. And I think that a lot of these guys that are potential draft picks, they play positions where you can kind of afford to make a cameo, where you can come out, play a series. It's not like a quarterback, or even offensive line. Well, I mean, Rasheed Walker's an offensive lineman, but you can rotate. They play positions that you can rotate guys, and it's not necessarily a big deal if someone only plays a couple series or a half or something like that. And I think you kind of laid it out in a piece this week where you talked about the young guys who are going to get the chance to step up. And I think that as much as you want to finish this season strong, and that's obviously the goal, I think this next month is really about Kalen King, Malik Mega, these younger guys, Landon Tangwall, getting that extra practice time, getting those extra reps, and getting this game experience against an SEC team to go in there and maybe use this as a springboard.
Yeah. I still have volume 2 coming out on Saturday. So thanks for not spoiling my second list of, I think it's 5, but I appreciate the tout on that. Daniel, let's move along. Like, the transfer portal has not been, no earth shattering news for Penn State yet. By my count, they have 3 guys in the transfer portal. I don't think any of the names are surprising. The most recent one is a veteran offensive lineman that's really just disappeared the last 2 years. Des Holmes, a guy that could play guard or tackle, is in the transfer portal now. And I think 2 defensive backs as well. Tyler Rudolph, I don't think has been with the program for a while. He's in the portal. And Enzo Jennings, a really highly coveted kid. I think this was his second year, but we never saw him either, from Michigan, is in the transfer portal as well. I don't think I'm missing anyone, but I do get a sense, though, things could heat up pretty quickly about the transfer portal. You just have to. I'm not sure about the timing of it. I'm not sure about how, if kids are kind of on the fence, they need to meet with Franklin. I'm not sure what's going on, but this is going to heat up a little bit.
Yeah, and I think Penn State's an interesting case because when you look at the spring, no one really left. I think they had the young cornerback who left, and maybe one other guy. I'm blanking right now, but you saw the kind of these other programs where there are these mass exoduses at the end of spring ball and guys moving around, and Penn State didn't have that, which I thought was kind of a testament to the coaching staff, especially after a 4-5 season. So I think that now maybe some of those guys that stuck around to kind of see what their opportunities would be, maybe those are the guys that are going to start looking elsewhere now. But I think the extra year of eligibility plays into it, where Des Holmes is going to be a 6th-year guy next year. So he'll want to go somewhere where he can play that final year. And I think that that's maybe where Penn State could have some movement, is those redshirt juniors, redshirt seniors, guys that have maybe been leapfrogged on the depth chart by younger guys that want to go somewhere to play and don't want to be backups. Because the way that James Franklin has really talked about this extra year of eligibility is that he's treating everyone like they're the actual year. Penn State didn't do I've looked at other rosters where I think Arkansas did this, where they paused everyone's year. So I was looking at, and I think I saw Traylon Burks, their wide receiver, listed as a sophomore, but he's a junior. But Penn State just kind of kept it your real year of eligibility. And Franklin, it kind of sounds like that it's going to be case by case. And I think that some of that has to do with roster management. A lot of it has to do with, I think, kind of keeping the rhythm of the program the same. But obviously we saw Tariq Castro-Fields came back, Jaquan Brisker came back. The transfers, Derek Tangelo was an extra year guy. So I think that that'll be interesting to watch. And I do think you're right that it's going to heat up, especially between now, signing day, the bowl game, that there's going to be some shuffling going on.
Yeah, I don't know if I should just write it in pencil, but I feel like Des Holmes, Old Dominion, Ricky Ronnie, they're still an FBS school. There's some Penn State influence there already. I just wonder if maybe there would be an opening for Des down there. I don't know. I think if Des is going to play and he wants to play his 6th year, I don't think he wants to play at I don't know that he wants to go to a lower level school. So if you want to play right away and you want to play FBS football, I think there's going to have to be a tie-in somewhere. I'm just wondering if like Old Dominion would be someplace that Des Holmes would think about, because I think Ricky Ronnie's a little bit familiar with him. I don't know why. My guess is he certainly looked good in 2019 when he was their swing tackle. Like he played a lot. They could play him at guard, and Phil Troutwine came in. Clearly he was a Matt Limegrover guy. Phil Troutwine came in, and I think he put a priority on playing the younger players. And I guess there's nothing wrong with that, but they talked about Des Holmes, Daniel, at the start of the year, and then they stopped talking about him. You just didn't see him. And it's unfortunate, because I think at one point he looked like a guy that could even maybe push to start. Maybe he had some health issues, but I might be spending too much time talking about Des Holmes. I just realized that. So I apologize to the Penn State fan base. Let's move along, Daniel, here on the Blue White Breakdown podcast. Let's talk about where we think things stand with Anthony Poindexter, who just got, I think he was just inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. Tremendous safety at Virginia when he played in the mid 90s, mid 90s, two-time first-team All-American, hurt his knee, and, he was never the same at the NFL level. But, a guy that he did a great job at Penn State in his 1 year. He's a Virginia guy. There's a head coaching opening at Virginia. He's got experience as a defensive coordinator. He was a co-defensive coordinator at Penn State. He was a coordinator at other spots, including Purdue. You had to think that maybe this induction was going to have to happen before he made maybe a decision, I think, on what he was going to do. You got any thoughts on what he might do? Head coach. I would think if he's going to get offered the head coaching job, that's going to trump any in-staff promotion at Penn State.
Yeah, so the reporting that's come out from the Virginia side of things, from some Virginia beat reporters, is that the Virginia athletic director flew out to Vegas this week, and that's where they've been meeting to to hammer out this contract, kind of get things in motion. And I think the report on Monday night was that the hiring was imminent, and that it could have been announced anywhere between Wednesday night, but no later than Wednesday, which is when we're recording this. So maybe by the time everyone hears this, Anthony Poindexter will be the coach at Virginia. But I've got the post ready. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's the type of thing where when someone is getting approached for that head coaching job, especially you look at Brent Pry getting approached for somewhere that he'd already coached before and had a history. Obviously, Anthony Poindexter has a history at Virginia. There's not really anything you can do. I don't really think no amount of money. You're not going to pay your defensive coordinator ACC head coach money. Like that's just kind of how it shakes out. So I think that it is kind of interesting that you're losing both of your defensive coordinators to the same conference, to two rivals within that conference. It is also interesting that Virginia and Virginia Tech are changing coaches again at the same time, because they also did that after the 2015 season when Fuente and Mendenhall came in. So it's just kind of, I mean, it's the nature of the business. You're not gonna stop Anthony Poindexter from going from co-defensive coordinator, safeties coach down there. And it just kind of, it's for James Franklin, it's kind of unfortunate timing. I mean, I think when you look at Brent Pry leaving, obviously you want to keep continuity. James talked about it on Sunday night, where he's really factoring in schematic fit, because they recruited all of these guys to Brent Pry's scheme. He wants those guys to be able to fit in whoever the new scheme is. So that's a priority for him. Obviously, Anthony Poindexter was just the co-defensive coordinator, so we don't necessarily know what it might look like, but that would at least have kept some continuity. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I think that probably you wanted to wait, if you're Anthony Poindexter, until after this induction ceremony, after these festivities, to kind of begin this next chapter. But that's kind of where all the signs are pointing. I mean, I don't think I've seen another name really put out there. I mean, his name was out there right after Mendenhall stepped down, and his name has kind of been at the top the entire time. So it's an interesting move, and I'd be very curious to see how that works out down there in Charlottesville.
Yeah, and we're talking about Anthony Poindexter, and as we record this, and very likely he won't be. There's a good chance he won't be part of Penn State staff next year. But my other thing is, it's fascinating. Do you think it was a lock that he was going to be promoted to be Penn State's DC, or do you think maybe James had a couple other people on his list that he wanted to talk to that he liked as much as Anthony? It's just fascinating. You just don't know how it all is going to play out. Clearly, Poindexter is really a great defensive mind, and he's great at a lot of things. He was a great player. That's one question I had, and the other one was Daniel. I think it just got a lot tougher for Penn State to recruit in the area they like to recruit, Maryland and DC and Virginia, because it's not only just Brent Pry and all the contacts he has, but it's Anthony Poindexter, who played at Virginia. So fascinating to see what that will look like for Penn State moving forward as well. But do you think in a perfect world, if Mendenhall stayed at Virginia, that James would have already announced that Poindexter was going to be the next he's going to be promoted to be the full-time DC?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, yeah. I think that Franklin definitely would have done his due diligence.
Right.
And obviously we've seen on the offensive side of the ball that, especially these past couple of years, he hasn't been afraid to go kind of outside of his tree to go get Kirk Shiraka, to go get Mike Yurcich. And especially, I think that given how the defense played last year, I think that he would probably look to see who out there can keep them at this level, who would give them the best shot. And maybe that is Poindexter, but I don't necessarily think that it was kind of I think that Poindexter, the way I phrased it, was probably the leading internal candidate, or the most logical internal candidate. But I think that Franklin has shown that he's not afraid to go outside of the program. Obviously, Poindexter was brought in from outside of the program. So I think that that's something to kind of watch. And it is an interesting point about recruiting in Virginia now. Yeah. I think Brent Pry made a crack about it during his intro presser, where he talked about the success that he had recruiting the area at Penn State, and about how it'll probably be easier to get those guys now that he's at Virginia Tech. Anthony Poindexter, when James Franklin hired Anthony Poindexter, he talks about how when they were younger assistants and Poindexter was at Virginia, Franklin was at Maryland, they were both recruiting the DMV, the Prince George's County area. They got to know each other on the trail. Obviously, those places are, those everyone wants to recruit there. But I think when you look at kind of the history that Virginia Tech and Virginia have had, obviously Virginia Tech under Frank Beamer did very well in the Tidewater area. UVA has had some success in that DMV area with PG County guys. So I think that that's another fun kind of subplot to watch, especially given that Poindexter and Pry both have familiarity there.
And don't you dare forget about Ricky Ronnie at Old Dominion, another Virginia school. Now, come on.
I won't forget about Ricky Ronnie.
Let's not forget about Ricky Ronnie. So it is pretty amazing to think that 3 head coaches at Virginia schools are now recruiting the same players that Penn State's trying to recruit, because Penn State has had a lot of success, at least in terms of perceived 4 and 5 stars in the Virginia area. Etor Gross-Matos, obviously Brandon Smith, Trace McSorley, a Virginia kid. Devin Ford was a very high-profile recruit. Ricky Slade, I think, was another Virginia kid. So in terms of perception and the best player high school talent, Penn State's been right there with anyone and getting it out of that area. So I think it's going to be a little bit harder. I know that they want to be more of a national recruiting team, but if you're going to get 4 and 5 stars, or out of Virginia, why go into Texas when they're right on your doorstep? We'll see. I think we're just assuming Poindexter's leaving. That after we finished and after we talked about all this, he's going to announce that he's going to stay and become the next DC at Penn State. and then we're going to have to burn this podcast and do another one. But what can you do? Timing is everything in life, Daniel. So we're going to press forward. Is there any other recruiting news, anything between now and signing day you think is interesting? You said pretty much the hay is in the barn for Penn State, and you hinted at some surprises. Anything that's piqued your curiosity between now and signing day with Penn State?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing to watch for me is, and this is, I guess, because Penn State really doesn't have much wiggle room, especially if they maybe want to save some scholarships for guys coming out of the transfer portal. I think from a big picture perspective is that you've seen so many changes on the coaching carousel. Obviously, when Lincoln Riley went from Oklahoma to USC, those Oklahoma kids were decommitting almost immediately. And that was a very big influx of talent back out there. I think there's a defensive tackle named Derek Moore from Baltimore who was committed to Oklahoma. And there's some reporting from 24/7 Sports that Penn State was eager to get back into the mix with him. He was a 4-star from St. Francis. And so I think that you kind of watch how all of that levels out. Obviously, a big domino is kind of the Notre Dame class, because I think that Penn State was that's a similar type of recruit, a similar footprint. But it looks like Marcus Freeman is keeping that class together. And I mean, I do think that if that class had really started to fall apart, that would have been a pretty intense feeding frenzy on those kids. So I think that that's kind of the big picture thing to watch, is kind of how things shake out with some of the moves that have been made. Obviously, Penn State isn't super. There's a couple Florida kids in the class, but I don't think the Mario Cristobal move from Oregon to Miami will really affect much of the class. But I think that's just kind of there's a week. This stuff happens fast. I follow a reporter to Miami Herald, and he said that he was at a practice last night, a high school practice, and Mario Cristobal was there, still in his suit from his intro presser. So these things move fast. There's going to be a lot of just outside of Penn State. There's going to be a lot of moves, and it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, so we're only a week away, right? Today is December 8th as we tape this. So I don't know what we're going to be doing. I guess we'll do a podcast next Wednesday, but I mean, I feel like it's signing day. We're going to have to work around the whatever Penn State has set up, but we're going to do what we can for the Penn State fan base. Daniel, I wanted to ask you one thing before we sign off on this Blue White Breakdown podcast. The Tampa trip is coming up for you, myself, Joe Hermit, PennLive's ace photographer. But I know that you really enjoy the road trip experience, getting to experience new things. I could see right away from the Madison trip, you definitely like to document some things and just kind of take in some of the sites. Was there one road trip you liked better than most that Penn State took this year, or did you just kind of get a kick out of going? I don't know how many times you've been to a lot of these places Penn State went to, and clearly I won't ask you about Maryland because you know Maryland quite well, but I was just curious if you've enjoyed either Des Moines. I think we were in Des Moines, Iowa City for the
Cedar
game.
Rapids.
Rapids, that's it. Madison, Columbus. We were on the outskirts of Columbus. I didn't know if Lansing, Detroit. I didn't know if you enjoyed any of those experiences over the other. But how did you like traveling to some of these Big Ten venues?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even make the trip to Maryland because I was busy that weekend.
Oh, that's right. Well, you didn't miss any.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably be near the bottom of the power rankings. I'm allowed to say that as an alum. But no, I mean, I'd already been to Ohio State, and I'd spent a lot of time in Columbus. I'd been to Iowa back in 2015 when I covered Maryland. So those were pretty as expected. I love Columbus. I had a great breakfast, some good breakfast tacos when I was out there. But I think Madison was a lot of fun, just kind of being in that atmosphere. It was, I think that was the first real sporting event that I'd been to with fans in the stands that big since before the pandemic. So that was just kind of, I think, the most fun for getting back out there. I was maybe more excited to go to work that day than I'd ever been to go to work, just because it was finally, we were back in a game, back in a stadium, back at Madison. So I think that's kind of, that was the one that took it. And I mean, Michigan State was fun because of the snow. That was a good little novelty. I don't think I'd never covered a real snow game before. So that was fun, but all the trips were great. The Big Ten atmospheres it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Shout out to Joe Hermit for getting us home from East Lansing to Detroit after the game in the snow and ice storm, because it was kind of touch and go a little bit there for a while. And I thought he did a great job. But yeah, I knew that you enjoyed Madison. Madison's a great spot. If any place in the Big Ten I would recommend, I'd probably recommend that one. It's just the fan base is unique. The atmosphere is unique. I could do without the 11 a.m. kickoff, but beggars can't be choosers. So it was also like it was like 90 degrees at kickoff. So, it was
a warm one.
It would have been much fun. I think much more fun to enjoy the game rather than kind of cover the game the way that we did. But at least it was an exciting finish. Penn State won it as part of their 5-0 start that everyone's forgotten about, including probably us. But, I know you're really busy. I know there's news coming every hour, every day. So Daniel, why don't we just cap this Blue White Breakdown podcast now, and hopefully there'll be some news very shortly. It's 12:30, very shortly, on Anthony Poindexter, and we can get to that. But other words, I'll plan on seeing you next week. How's that?
That sounds great to me, Bob.
All right, that's it, guys. We'll talk to you soon.